Hi, I'm Barbara Grant, a neurodiverse couples and individual coach working with clients all over the world. And this is Jana Smith. Jana, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a resilience coach and I work with people to help them regulate their nervous system, especially as it pertains to relationships, symptoms, and then recently I've added brain spotting to my menu of services. And I'm really excited about what I'm seeing. I've logged about 40 client sessions so far and just incredibly excited about what this is doing for people.
Amen. That's it. You've already given us our headline. We are here to talk about brain spotting. And I heard about this but from you because I remember you were, I think, a recipient of some of this treatment in work you were doing in relational realm of healing relational trauma and other things. And you could talk about that. But it was something you experienced and then had this amazing experience of and then said, "Whoa, what is this?" and learned about it, went through the certification process, which is considerable. I kudos to you. I'm very much admiring you wanting to do this correctly and get certified and be accountable to people who know what they're doing with this. It's one of those things that could all kinds of people are going to be doing brain spotting soon, but maybe not everybody knows what they're doing like Jana knows what she's doing. So go ahead and tell us that how did you get into this and what is it? And yeah, let's go.
Yeah. So my husband and I were seeing a therapist who offers brain spotting. She's actually a certified trainer. And so that's how I learned about it. And she just offered it to me. And we were doing some joint sessions and some one on one sessions. And so in a one on one session with her, I expressed interest in it. And she offered it for a particular situation where I was having a recurring stuck response to, the summary is back when I wasn't very well, my husband and I were doing a lot to support that. And as soon as I recovered and felt better, then he jumped into a whole bunch of projects that were on his wish list. And I had thought when I got better, then we'll do stuff as a family, like go to the beach on Saturdays. And he had a different idea of how he wanted to sort of bounce back from that time. And for me, that created a second round of trauma in that it just felt like every weekend I had hopes for what we might do. And then I ended up largely watching the kids and doing housework on the weekends. And so that felt like a stuck cycle. And fast forward a number of years, after some work together and some work in counseling, he had shifted the way that he was balancing his time and not spending all of his time that way. But I was still finding that I was pretty triggered by all the projects that had happened and not interested in hearing about new projects that he was doing because it just felt like it was this recurring trauma, even though things had shifted. So I brought that to the session and we did brain spotting around that. And at the time when I did the brain spotting, it didn't feel like anything remarkable had happened. There's different things that you do with eye position and a process that you walk through. And I got all done with that session and thought, okay, that was interesting, but I mean, whatever. I don't know that it did anything. And over the next couple of weeks, I was really surprised to see how my brain responded differently after that over time to some different situations. And I remember the therapist saying to me, one of the ways that you will know that this has worked is you'll go out to your backyard and look at the patio and the whole yard and all the landscaping that your husband did over those couple of years when you wanted to be spending time as a family and you will no longer feel a negative charge with it. You won't feel triggered by it. You'll just be able to look at it and say, wow, that's a beautiful yard. And that seemed really too good to be true. But that's basically what happened.
Wow.
And not only that, I actually developed more of an appreciation for the things that he was doing, especially because now the pattern is not so hurtful. So different pattern, and it allowed my brain to sort of catch up with the present of here's what's happening now instead of being stuck in the past. So after I had two brain spotting sessions with her, and I had really been looking for a piece for my clients to deal with those stuck spots because, Barbara, you and I have lots and lots of tools. We have so many things that we can offer people, but sometimes it doesn't matter how much they try or they practice or what they do. it's they can agree to it up here. They can say to us, yes, this is a good idea, but somehow whatever's happening inside, they continue to feel triggered or stuck. And so I was super interested to find out more about it, how it works, and to get trained because we all want to help people not be stuck. And that's what this feels like, is an opportunity to get unstuck.
Mhm, mhm. Amen. All right. Well, this is exciting. So, in learning about it, you went and got certified, and the certification process was several weekends over a lot of time. And there was study, and there was demonstration, and there was application attempts. And what does brain spotting like? How do you actually do it? How if I came to you over Zoom for brain spotting, what what would it look like?
Sure, great question. So also just to clarify, I'll be done completely done with all of my certification requirements in September. The
Okay.
neat thing is it's actually hard to screw up brain spotting. And after the very first weekend of training, they tell you go out and start using it with your clients, the part
Right.
that you've learned. And then
Right.
you get to keep building on that. And so, I'm still in process, but the great thing is I'm completely equipped to do the things that I've been trained to do already.
Right.
And it's just very life-giving.
Well,
So
and
if
it's
you
not a it's
Mhm.
not a traumatizing treatment. The
No.
opportunity for you to hurt anybody is like nil, I would
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very resourcing
Right.
to the nervous system, and often one of the things that I think is unique about it is they've done a lot of research with people who are very traumatized, who can't tolerate other things and seem to do well with brain
Mm.
spotting. So usually it's either, oh, it didn't do as much as I wanted to, or it worked great, or wow, it exceeded my expectations. But I haven't had anybody be harmed by it, and I've never heard of that. So
Okay.
it's very safe.
So what would it look like if I came to you and you and I had spent time together, and we had identified that there was this particular trigger for me, and how would you walk me through? I don't even know if you have your thing
Yeah, I
handy.
do. And
Oh
so
yeah.
we can do kind of a pretend demonstration.
Oh yeah. Let's do that.
So I would probably say to you, okay, Barbara, sometimes people have a lot going on and this bothers me and that bothers me. But I might say to you, what is the one or two of the biggest sticking points for you? What feels really hard, or where have you gotten hung up lately that's really bothering you? And you could come with an example.
I would say it's a family member that I at times feel at odds with, and I'm
Yeah.
apprehensive and not feeling that I can enjoy them when things even are going well. Sort of like you're looking at the garden and all the projects going, I don't know about this. And that is something I am actually experiencing.
Yeah. So then I would ask you, see if you can identify where you feel that in your body. When you think about that situation or put
Here.
yourself there, right
Yeah.
there. Okay. And, some people feel that and some people don't. And, we might tend to stereotype that it would be somebody who's autistic can't, but that's actually not true. Some people who are on the spectrum actually can feel it in their body, and some people who aren't
Right.
don't feel it in their body. So there's
Right.
other ways we would work with that if you said, I don't feel it anywhere. That's not a stumbling block. So then go ahead and notice that feeling, whether it's tightness or whatever it is. And on a scale from 0 to 10, how activated do you feel around that when you think about that situation and how you feel in your body? 0
I'd
being
say
not.
4 to 5, at least a
Okay,
4 to 5
great.
on a
So,
scale of 1 to 10.
yeah,
Yeah.
so then the next thing that we would do is say, okay, notice that and pay attention to it. And then we would find a spot in your visual field where you feel the more triggered by that. So the interesting thing is the muscles around our eyes are automatically monitored, and they're controlled by the brain, and they're connected to our autonomic nervous system. So the unconscious part of our brain has a connection to those muscles around the eyes. And it's interesting because eye doctors have figured this out, and they have some tricks with people related to this. So it's just corroborated by different fields of study.
Right.
So we'd try to find about what would be eye level for you, and then I would have you think about that thing that's triggering and how it feels, and then I would say, check it out here and see how it is. And I would give you, 30 seconds or a minute. And then I would say, okay, let's compare that to how it feels right here.
Well, I could tell between the two that it was worse over there than it was here.
Okay. And then if we had, a normal length session, then I would come over here and check it. And then we would do, is it more if we go up or down or whatever. But for the sake of demonstration, let's say this is the spot we've determined is the most activating for you. Then we would just have you sit and mindfully notice. Notice that sensation in your body and notice how you feel as you look at this spot. And we're not trying to do or create anything in this. There's not what you're supposed to be thinking about. It's really a mindfulness process where you get to observe and make space for your system. And it will usually kind of go through a process or bring up whatever needs to be dealt with. And this is where it's the access to the unconscious reactive part of the brain. So as you sit here, oftentimes it'll feel stronger, right? Whatever the thing is that's
It is
bothering you, the
actually.
emotions will come up. So
It
how do you
is.
feel?
It is. It's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, so either the physical sensation will intensify or emotions
Well,
will
both.
intensify.
Yeah.
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 And what will happen often as you stay here, if you just create space and we hold space for this together, for it to process, it'll often come up like a wave, feel really intense. Sometimes people will cry or they'll start to get angry or they'll feel really, really sad. And then it'll start to come down and dissipate. And then the sensation will lighten and they'll feel a little bit better. And sometimes that can take minutes, sometimes it happens quickly, and oftentimes there's a few layers that need to be processed through on a single spot. So this is a sort of one-dimensional. There's all kinds of things we can do, like go back behind the spot, or
Yeah.
there's a lot of variations, but it gives you just a little bit of a taste and
Mm.
a feel for what the process might be like. There's actually not as much talking, although sometimes people will process out loud as things are coming up. And we'll often support it with bilateral music. So there's different elements we can bring in to help
Wow.
resource the brain.
Right.
Um,
But it's not a narrative. It's not a talking therapy at all.
it's
It's
not.
very neurologically, dealing with the wiring of the brain and the how the brain is sorting it out and processing things and
Yeah.
interesting and
It's
awareness at the same time.
Yeah, it's like a very resourced somatic mindfulness combination
Okay.
that also creates a very safe container for the nervous system, where if you were to just try to process through that on your own without this kind of neurological support, it won't create the same kind of ability to sit with the intensity and then for it to
Right.
dissipate on its own.
Very cool. That's a good point because I think it is. I mean, I'm thinking right now of what's called exposure therapy, which is, when somebody has a phobia, for instance, and they have a hard time flying, for instance, then exposure therapy would slowly, incrementally walk them through the process of actually being in that flight situation, pretend flying, actual flying, and then overcoming the trauma at each step of the way and learning to manage it and self-regulate through it. So the brain can do these things. It's the prompts and the cues, and this is so elegant and simple. You don't need to rent an airplane.
No, it is simple. I mean, it's kind of deceptively simple, right?
Yeah.
Because there's all
Yeah.
these layers to it. And
Yeah.
And there's nuances because let's say that you were processing on this spot and it hit a 10 out of 10 and you were like, wow, this is
Yeah.
so intense.
Yeah.
Well, what can happen then is your brain can go into a freeze or dissociative state. And so it's on the practitioner to walk through it with you. And if we see that you're approaching the edge of your window of tolerance and it's going to go beyond, then we can switch it up and say, okay, let's find a resource spot. So maybe when you look over here, everything settles and your brain goes, oh, and so you can move processing to a spot that supports that. So it's nice to know somebody's there creating the safety with you
Right.
and witnessing it with you, and that there are all kinds of things that can be done to support you along the way so that you don't get pushed beyond.
Well, this is very beautiful. I love the language you're using about creating a safety place, where it's contained and
Mhm.
it's defined and there are parameters and I'm not alone. And there are so many people I know that have tears welling underneath a layer of control or busyness. And, they don't even know how to access grief necessarily. but they feel the tension of holding back that grief. And that's something that this could maybe help relax people into grieving, even, and helping them find that place of safety, which in this day and age is very difficult for people to access. So,
Yeah,
so
it
you and
sure is.
I, before we started our video, had talked a little bit about, how I was doing some resourcing of um, information for a client who's dealing with alexithymia, meaning a sort of a color blindness around emotions, what they feel, either physically sensation of emotional, or the emotional sensation, or an inability to articulate emotions, or even perceive or cognitively empathize or understand emotions in others. And it's a very real condition that can happen in neurodiversity, ADHD, autism. It can happen in other situations. It's not just neurodiversity that alexithymia shows up. But you and I then were talking about that it doesn't have to be this even this huge buried trauma. Like EMDR is specifically for trauma, and it can be other kinds of flavors of things. So maybe uh, describe a little bit of the range of application. So when people listen, they could say, "Oh, maybe I should call Jana. Like I need a brain spotting checkup."
Yes. Yeah, it can be great for so many things. And whether it's, as you mentioned, grief, if we're having trouble processing our emotions, if we feel disconnected from our body, if we feel like we're stuck or things are easily triggering, but we don't really know why. And the great thing is, we aren't necessarily going to know why. We don't have to, because the brain can repattern and create safety even without knowing exactly what the onset was. In fact, in the brain spotting training, they talk about even pre-verbal traumas. Like if you were left to cry in your crib for 2 hours and you may not even know that, but oftentimes that can then create patterns in the brain of like abandonment fear or whatever that can get rewired without having to know what the event is because it's stored in the body. So that's why we connect with, if you feel it here, that may connect with what's happening now, but it may be connected with 5 other events throughout your history that your brain stored here. And so as we process on that spot, it helps to kind of bring up the layers of whatever was stored. So it's useful for any kind of trauma. It's useful for just nervous system regulation, whatever's dysregulating. It's helpful for expanding the window of tolerance. And then as far as specific applications where I've seen it help people if they're experiencing physical symptoms, if they're married to somebody who's neurodivergent and really struggling with the trauma and the emotions and
Yeah, the
the
Cassandra
reality.
syndrome, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
And then it's also helpful for people who are neurodivergent in terms of getting them connected with their body and their emotions, helping support regulation,
Right.
getting them unstuck, and decreasing their reactivity to different stimuli.
Or
Um,
OCD even. I mean,
OCD, yeah, and I
OCD
went
is
to a training specifically for how to use brain spotting with OCD. There's a specific frame set up with 2 different spots where you work with the what the brain is doing and the sticky gear in the brain, and then you work with the issue or the behavior that's the repetitive kind of
mhm,
issue that's coming up for them. So there's all kinds of different ways that it can work. And it sounds a little too good to be true and a little snake oilish, but really you can use brain spotting for just about anything
mhm,
because
mhm.
it's a global technique for the whole body and nervous
Yeah.
system. So any struggle, it doesn't hurt to try.
Well, I think there's a lot of out of the box therapies, and if truly, before there was modern medicine, there was shamanistic healing, there was chanting, there was prayer, there was anointing of oil, there was all these things that put the person, the recipient of the healing, in a place of receptivity and awareness and expectation, even. And that alone is a powerful approach to healing because it sets a stage for something to happen. And I do think what you're describing is that we encode in our bodies all the trauma, all the anxiety, all the memory of all of that happened on an electrical that's not even conscious, right? And hypnotherapy somewhat deals with this too. I'm assuming. I don't know much about that, but I think that brain spotting is um, because it's optical, and we already know from EMDR that there's a real connection between the optic nerves and eye movement and how brains work. And we take in so much more visually and process visually than we probably even realize. So that this is optical is interesting and makes a lot of sense. And the nuance that you're describing is involved in this. There's a lot of layers, there's different points, there's different ways to approach this. Your sensitivity of what to present as an opportunity or a guide, because you know people are putting themselves in your hand. They're not going to tell you what to do with the wand and the spot, and you're going to make suggestions, and it's easier for them to just be in a state of awareness and responsiveness than having to be all alone figuring stuff out, trying to process or grieve or do their own work. And some people can get there. Some people do get there. Many people get there somehow on their own over time. But you're right, for that stuckness thing where the record keeps skipping, and we just can't get out. I think this is so intriguing. And I think too, it's really somewhat of a new intervention and therapeutic tool, isn't it? It's not got like 25 years behind it, or how long has it been
Actually,
around?
yeah, it was in the early 2000s that David Grand discovered it as an offshoot of EMDR, and then it took a little while for the development and for it
Okay.
to gain popularity, but they do have data going all the way back. So the neat thing is it isn't new, but it's catching on, which
Yes.
is nice because that means that we do have, you know, history behind it showing how it
Yeah.
works. And to speak to what you're mentioning, here's two things that I think are really neat. First, a lot of the modalities like you're talking about, like hypnotherapy or whatever, that are getting at the subconscious, they were suggestible, and some people feel vulnerable and concerned about giving away that kind
Yeah.
of power of suggestibility. This is different in that the whole goal when you're brain spotting with somebody, they use the analogy of the tail of the comet. So the client is the head of the comet, and the practitioner's whole goal is to stay in the tail. And so, even though I may set up a frame, it's not uncommon for the client to say, actually, it's more triggering over here. Okay, great. Let's go there. Because your brain and anybody's brain will present what's needed next. So I'm not actually in the role of suggesting. I'll
Okay.
just hold the space and then we watch what the brain needs next because God has designed our brains to heal. And if we give them safe space and connected attunement and safe attachment, the system will present what it needs.
Right.
And it's just kind of a miracle to watch that.
Wow, I am so excited that we're talking about this because I've heard of bits and pieces from you about it and have read a little bit about it, but this is so wonderful now to be understanding it a little bit better. And of course, I've got like, clients are flipping through my mind going, oh my gosh, I can't wait to produce this video and send it to like a lot of people."
Yeah.
Because so how do you work with people? Like how could somebody connect with you and find out about you and get a spot on your brain spot calendar? Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
And what does it cost and all of that? If you, I mean, generally, you might not want to be specific because I know your pricing is fluid depending on the people.
Sure. Yeah. So, the easiest way is just go to my website and look at what's there, janamsmith.com, and see, what resonates with you and what you're needing. There are free resources and videos, and I offer a variety of different things. But an easy place to start is an intro call. And at the time that we're recording this, those are still free. I may have to charge for them at some point because that's what happens when we get busier. But
Right.
for right now, so that's a 25-minute intro call, and we can talk about what is needed and what are you looking for. And then I can work with you to help shape what makes sense. Brain spotting is available during any coaching call. So you can buy an individual session or a package of 4, which is more discounted, and you can see all of that pricing on my website. So it's all there to review. And then, people can always send me questions on my website as well.
Excellent. And how does this work together with other kinds of somatic body exercises or other things that you offer, which, is more the background that I was familiar with when I met you and I took your training and,
Mm.
enjoyed learning some of your, interventions and teach them to many people. So,
Yeah. So, depending on what people are presenting with, if they are really struggling on an ongoing basis with dysregulation, I'll often encourage them to take my online course so that they can learn about their nervous system and become
right.
more aware. And then the somatic exercises can really help support that process. If they just are coming with, here's my one stuck issue and I've worked with a lot of people and I just want help with this, then we might just go straight to brain spotting. Oftentimes it's a combination, right, of some education and some brain spotting. So the nice thing is I can customize that based on what the person needs and what they're presenting with.
That sounds ideal. That sounds ideal. And you say you've done over 40 uh, hours already with clients in session with this, and you were describing some really amazing breakthroughs that some people have had. Anything in particular that you could share without naming names, a particular like, wow, this was amazing.
Yeah. I have one client who was really struggling with feeling triggered by her mother and setting boundaries. And she, in a couple of sessions, was like, wow, it doesn't bother me anymore. I can just say, no, that's not going to work for me. And she was losing sleep and up at night and couldn't be on her phone certain hours in case mom would text. So, really big, significant shifts there. Um, have a client who's struggling with healing from some past trauma and a neurodiverse relationship that she's no longer in, that was just feeling super stuck and in freeze around that, and either go 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 stay busy or just I can't do anything, those sort of polar sides of the dysregulation wheel of bouncing back and forth between those. And after just a couple of sessions, was like, wow, I had a day where I could just do what needed to get done. And I didn't feel like I was in adrenaline. And I also didn't feel like I was going to sit on the couch all day and, choose between those two options. So that was really empowering for her. Trying to think of what else. I mean, several people have emailed me afterwards and said, wow, that was so much more effective than I thought it would be. Or, oh my goodness, I felt calm for the first time in I can't remember how long. So, and I have one client who really did not tolerate EMDR, like would struggle for about 2 days after a session and was super nervous to try brain spotting. And so we did smaller, shorter tastes and more resource sourcing versions of that. And she responded really well and was super excited to have something that actually felt comfortable and safe.
Yeah. Well, as you're describing it again, I think about how many people have been so traumatized. I've worked with mostly women present with the trauma because they're the ones more in touch with their feelings and have more of a willingness to talk about the impediment that their trauma is to relationship and how they receive or give relationship, um, sexual abuse, or long-term covert emotional abuse by a narcissist or a partner who is just destructive. And some of these people, women, are in cognitive disarray. I mean, they have so much cognitive dissonance. They
Mhm,
can't think clearly. They're not sure who they are. Their sense of value and safety is shot, and
mhm,
they have no energy to even leave because they're sort of in a trauma bond with the person who's been abusing them. And that's that very hopeless situation where the very thing they need to do is leave, set boundaries and leave. The very thing they can't do is set boundaries or leave. So I'm thinking that because this is so safe and it doesn't have them talking about the trauma that happened to them, which you and I did another video where we talked about how narrative when we retell the story of trauma, we relive it. It doesn't help anything. It
Mhm.
just doesn't get us out of the loop, right? To cry and cry and cry and it's just like no deeper, deeper into the rut. So this isn't like that at all. And it
No.
wouldn't even open wounds necessarily. It would be just gently helping the person be aware and of whatever it is that's coming up for them, whether it's nothing or a lot. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and sometimes pieces of trauma will surface, but it's not like we're going to go through the whole saga and we don't have to go digging for it. It's just as the layers come up and are ready to be shed, sometimes bits and pieces of the history will surface. But the client has the option whether to speak that out loud or just let it process quietly. So that's up to them what feels the most safe and healing. And it's different than going through the entire series because the brain will bring up what it needs to process and recategorize and release and kind of file away in the past, which doesn't isn't necessarily linear. So you don't have to catalog and know, here's what happened and then this and then that. You just have sort of the sensations or the emotions come up and sometimes a piece of a memory and you can say, oh yeah, this takes me back to when I was such and such age, but you don't have to go in and flesh the whole thing out in order for your system to repattern around what happened and take you out of that being in any way a threat currently.
right. That's fascinating. There's so many new um, things that we hear about ketamine, for instance,
Mhm.
which is really a psychedelic drug. And I heard about it first like 4 or 5 years ago in Southern California, where I was living at the time. A friend of mine was a counselor and had found a medical doctor who administered the ketamine, and they did joint sessions with their clients to uh, give them the ketamine, talk it through. It was this whole process, and it definitely was intriguing, but, part of me is like, "Wow, mind-altering chemistry, that's extreme, like, that's a lot," and I'm not saying it doesn't work. I know many people have had ketamine and have a lot of great things to say about it. What I love about this is there are no pharmaceuticals involved.
Right. It's a little easier to access and probably cheaper for that reason, right?
Absolutely. And so what is the difference between doing this live with a person face to face or which I think most of your clients or you do it virtually with
Yeah.
Zoom, right?
Right now it's 100% virtual. Um, Especially for anyone who's got sensory or whatever, I think being on Zoom is easier because you all you have to do is choose what's in the frame
Right.
and you don't have to worry about what else is in the environment. You don't have to drive to the
Mhm.
session and deal with traffic or am I going to be on time? You don't have to sit in a waiting room and wonder, are other people going to come in here or someone going to see me? You don't have to filter out music that's in the waiting room or, there's
Right.
all these layers when you go to another space
Yeah.
that can create low level activation to the
Mhm.
nervous system.
Mhm.
So I really like it because most people who are coming for this either have a little bit of trauma or some neurodivergence or whatever. And so it's just one layer of not extra that they don't have to navigate in order to access it. You're in
Mhm.
your own space, you can have a blanket on, you can be in your pajama pants, you can have your tea and you can get comfortable. So I like that aspect to it a lot.
Mhm.
And all of Brainspotting, just like the rest of the world, went on to Zoom during COVID. So that we've got 5 years worth of all the people who've been doing this for a long time, and the trainers and everybody now have been offering this online for that many years, and they are saying, "Wow, it really works because you don't have to be in the same space to do the processing."
Yeah.
So
So I have
short and
a
sweet is fine.
I have a question which won't surprise you at all since I'm very into color and soothing color, calming color, gentle color, because so many people I work with are visually very triggered, and I don't want them to be distracted by anything I'm wearing. I want them to see me in a consistent, soothing way. Um, I'm noticing your pointer top is blue, and that my son left this morning for his work as a nurse wearing exactly that blue as a scrub, and I call these my scrubs. And I'm wondering if there's something to that as well, because I've told you how much I appreciate the way you present yourself on Zoom, the gentleness and serenity of your space and how it appears, and the fact that the blue pointer just matches everything about you, and it's just part of the whole blend of it, the visual thing. It's not like red and on flame or something. Is there anything in there? Could it be pink? Could it be purple? It doesn't matter? Or
Mhm.
have
Yeah, I have different color pointers for that reason because sometimes, and this is a more resourcing color. Sometimes, I will pull out, I have a yellow one and a green one on my desk, and then I have a couple more colors in the closet. But sometimes I will ask somebody, which color would you like to work with today? Or if they're working on something really activating, they might want a brighter or a more activating color because that might help their processing. So there are choices that people have. And that's
wow.
again with the follow the comet.
Yeah.
I let people guide what they need and they'll know. They might say, "Oh, I don't want that color," or "Can I have the whatever color?" or "I always want such and such color," and we just go with that.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad I asked about that, because I think the times I've talked to you about it, I've seen the blue pointer and I'm like, I'm wondering if there's something about that color. So that's so interesting. Oh my gosh. Well, is there anything about brain spotting that you think I should know or we should know that I haven't asked you about, that you want to make sure we know about?
Mhm. Well, one of the things I like about it is there are aspects of it that you can teach people so they can practice it on their own. And one of the things I love is when I can empower people. No one wants to be dependent on a therapist or a coach or a practitioner for the
Right.
rest of their life.
Right.
But sometimes there are tools that we're going to want to bring back. And so especially the resourcing part of brain spotting, people can practice whenever they want, and they can also use the bilateral music. So I will often encourage people after we've worked on something, and if we've identified a resource spot, I can say to them, "Hey, if you get triggered this week, go put your headphones on and find your resource spot and just spend 5 minutes there." And it just helps the process. And then that's something that you have access to whenever you want. And sometimes our resource spot moves, but once they learn what it feels like and how to find it, then they don't have to have an appointment in order to have access to it. And I love that.
So, for those who aren't aware about what bilateral music is, could you give us an explanation about that?
Yes. Bilateral music is music that is meant to be listened to in headphones because the sound transfers from one ear to the other, kind of almost like a gentle wave. It's slow. And the going back and forth stimulates both sides of the brain and is soothing to the nervous system. So it's another layer of resourcing that we have access to that we can use with brain spotting. Some people find it annoying and overstimulating, and other people really like it. So again, it's just client preference. And there's lots of different types of music. Some of them are quieter and more mellow, and some of them are more interesting and lively. And you can look for bilateral music on Spotify. So you don't have to work with me or do brain spotting to access that because it's used in EMDR and some other applications as well. And that on its own can be nice. It's not the same as brain spotting, obviously, but it can be a tool that can help support the process.
Interesting. Well, that's something I might need to talk to you more about as I continue to open up opportunities for people to experience some somatic exercise. Ideally, so how you and I would work together, since our both clients might be seeing this, um, if they start with me and I am identifying with them that there is a place of stuckness about a certain dynamic, maybe it's setting a boundary or a triggered anxiety response or a rejection sensitive dysphoria reaction that is high, highly, that is getting in the way of the other coaching work they want to do with me. That is something then that I could say, I think you need to talk to Jana Smith about working on this piece. And then I would ideally send them to you, connect them, maybe come in for your free, then work with you. work on that and anything else that they identify as impeding them. And then they may be able to continue doing the couples coaching work with me while they're seeing you. And I do have other clients who are doing trauma recovery or EMDR or personal therapy work, where they have a physical trainer, they're doing PT for some reason. So I'm not by any means the only person helping them, but
Yes.
there is no uh, necessarily couples interventions that you would do. You would be helping them with their individual opportunity to resolve and stabilize. I would be able to help them understand the relational and work in the three dimension with the other partner as well. So how would you, when you, I know I've met people that you've sent my way as well. So how
Yes.
does that work from your end of it?
Yeah, great description. I will send people to you if they're wanting work on the marriage. So sometimes they'll come to me and we'll do some brain spotting, and some of what's coming up is they're stuck with the other person. And so I can work with them on their own, their hurt, their unresolved stuff, their resentment, their pain. And then if they're feeling like, okay, I'm feeling a little better about that, but I want to work on what can we do as a couple, then I want them to work with you since I don't specialize in working with marriage.
Okay. Well, and
Mhm.
I'm thinking right now of a class I've been offering, a Cassandra recovery group, and I have 8 women in it, and 4 of them are from abroad. One was in Singapore today, one was in Poland, 2 are in the UK, and I offered it a time of day for me early in the morning, which I knew would be accessible for more of them in the evening or overseas. The one in Singapore, it was at like 12 a.m. when we were finished, and she was still up for it. Um, so in a group like that, where there's some need for validation that they all have together, which is so glad, just knowing that I'm not the only person in the world that has this problem. Group work is wonderful in that way. And you do group work too, which I've been a part of one of your groups. Though you didn't do brain spotting individual therapy in that group, but I'm
Mhm.
sure you maybe are introducing brain spotting now as you're teaching people about their neuro opportunities and how getting resolved can
Mhm.
include maybe brain spotting. So yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you and I keep talking since we both go to the same church. We see each other fairly regularly, and if we haven't seen each other, one of us says, "Let's have dinner, let's take a walk, let's Zoom," because we are learning so much from our clients and from each other and from
Mhm.
our colleagues at large in the world that we meet with, in the neurodiverse world. At least we share a lot of colleagues. So um,
Yes, we do. Yeah.
I am so excited, Jana.
Yes, I am too. And I'm next month, starting in July, going to be doing a training for doing brain spotting with groups. So that's my next layer. I'm excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, please let me know about that so I can get the word out. All right. And
Yes.
well, if anyone has any questions for me or for Jana or for both of us, please access our contact information below in the YouTube description. And we are so excited to, be talking about this, to be blessed, to be in ministry in a way, on the front line of learning and of bringing healing opportunities that God has created in each of our physiological, neurological bandwidths. God made us to be healed and healing. And so, any last words, Jana?
Just don't give up if you're stuck. There are lots of things that we can try.
Amen. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's great talking as usual.
Thank you.